It's Cardboard Time, episode number 83, and I'm your host, Arwen Kathke. On today's episode, we have a review of Sonic Roll. We're going to talk about my collection reorganization and have an interview with Dominic Crapuchettes of North Star Games. So let's dive right into this, and we're going to talk about my newly dubbed Shelf of Aspiration. So thank you to Tiffany Lee for that new nomenclature. It feels better. It really does feel a lot better. And it is down by 2. It is under the 150 mark, and it is at 149. So I did make it under 150. And for a little while, we actually didn't think that was going to happen. It was funny when I was doing a game day with my friend Jordan, we were kind of talking about how it was going to be close to impossible to keep it under 150 because of everything that was coming in. But somehow I managed, and through a lot of play, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's talk about what did come in, and more specifically, through this reorganization process, I found 5 games that I had never logged into my collection. Those 5 being The Fox Experiment, Rush and Crush, Psychic Pizza Deliverers Go to the Ghost Town, My Island, and Septima. So some big heavy hitters there that I did not even count when they came in. So I did have to add them to my list. They do count because I haven't played them. They're in my collection. So it was a little bit disheartening to see that. I was looking through my BGG listing and that because I basically printed everything out, and those weren't on there. And I was very surprised to see that. So, but anyways, things that actually came in, we had 5. Sonic Roll came in. That doesn't count, and we will be talking about that today. It doesn't count because I've already played it. I played a full game at PAX, so there we go. We're good. The games that did count, though, were Let's Go to Japan, Papillon Gardens, Stone Spine Architects, and Botany. And 3 games that I actually just removed from my collection. I was able to get rid of them, being Slap 45 Mini, Cluster F, and Planet Surprise. There was no need for me. I had no ambition on getting those to the table whatsoever and really didn't want anything for them, so I was able to get rid of them very easily. I did play 8 games over the past 2 weeks. I'm very proud of myself, and thank you to Jordan for helping me out with this. But yeah, 8 games. I think that's really, really good. We'll start off with the Fox Experiment. This is one that I do want to cover probably within the next couple of episodes and talk about, as well as Apiary. I do definitely want to talk about that. Quirky Circuits, I also want to review, and why not? I'll review Bigfoot Roll and Smash as well. So those were the 4 that Jordan and I were able to get out when we hung out on a Saturday. Stone Spine Architects, I did get that to the table, as well as 2 versions of Pocket Paragons that were technically listed as full games because they actually are. You can play them in the box by themselves. So the Acquisitions Incorporated version and Space Lion both came to the table. And then finally, this morning, Let's Go to Japan came to the table as well. And that one was very pretty. I did have a little bit of a color vision issue with it, and it was basically separating the components. And when I do get around to reviewing it, I'll talk about this. But basically, it was very difficult to separate those because the blue and the purple are very close, and then the red, the green, and those colors were also similar to each other. So yeah, it was a very busy couple of weeks for me when it came to playing games. I did have a little bit of time this weekend to get some stuff out as well, and may get something out right after this. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But regardless, I'll talk about that if I do on the next episode. So I did want to talk about the shelf reorganization. So this has been another big project that's really kept me busy over the past couple of weeks. I did get it complete. I do feel a lot better having it done. I really wanted a physical representation of my unplayed games instead of having them just jumbled in with everything else I own. And this was an idea that I had from talking to Carla Kopp. And she had mentioned, how she did her organization and that. And I just figured, you know what? It's my collection. I can organize it however I want. My previous organization strategy had just been putting everything in rough alphabetical order. So all the A's went together, all the B's went together, etc. Just because it was easier to find. But knowing what my unplayed games are and having them in one space is fantastic. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But, shout out to Carla Kopp for kind of getting me out of that space where I was like, no, it has to be organized this way. So I was able to kind of separate everything into 4 categories. And I said, now's a good time to go through my collection, do a deep dive. So I took my entire collection, I separated everything out that was on my shelf of aspiration and said, okay, I'm going to take all of these. These are going right by, in my game room, I have a set of stairs. Right as you come downstairs, they're right there. So I have to see them. I have to look at them. They're right there facing me so that I have to acknowledge their presence. And before I get to the other games in my collection, they're sitting right there and I can take a look at them. And it also helps, just put a visual to it. So that's the first category. Then the second one, I took everything that I wanted to definitely keep and I put that into a collection. So these are my keepers. These are my tried and true. I've played them. I know that I want to hang on to them, at least for the time being. I have no plans on getting rid of them in the immediate future. They're right there. The third one is a play once and decide category. So this one, I thought, there's some games I really should play again and see what my thoughts are. If I don't like it, if, I don't feel strongly about it, that I want to keep it in my collection, I'm going to call it. I'm going to get it a new home. Somebody else is going to enjoy it more than me. So that's what those shelves are. And it's almost a full Calyx 5x5 of those games where I'm just like, I'm going to play this one more time and see what I think. And then finally, I had 7 Chip Theory bags of Cull games that I just said, these need to find a new home. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find them a new home sometime this year, whether it's conventions or, one of the FLGS sales, etc. They will find their way into new homes, get them to friends, etc. So I do have a partial listing on BGG. They're my 4 trade games. So if you are in search for something and I may have it, you can take a look. You can check it out. My BGG ID is Cardboard Time, so you can go and search for that. This is already helping. I'm already more excited about the games that are on my shelf of aspiration. I'm more excited to have kind of a visual representation of these are the games that I should really play first, unless I'm looking for a favorite that I really want to go in and play again. If I get a craving to go play Space Base, I can get it off the shelf. If I want to play Castles of Burgundy, it's right there. etc. So those things, I'm able to access them, but I do have to kind of look on both ends that are closest to my downstairs and access point. I have to look at them. I have to say, yeah, I want to, kind of bypass this and go play something else. But I actively have to make that decision. I do think that helps quite a bit. And I'll probably follow up with this in a couple of episodes, see how it's going, see what I'm thinking and how the process is working so that you can potentially do the same thing yourself. So anyways, let's get into Sonic Roll. Now, this is from 1 to 4 players in 30 to 60 minutes, designed by Anthony Thorpe. The art is by Tracy Yardley and published by Kesco. Sonic Roll is a semi-collaborative multiplayer game for 1 to 4 players in the style of 16-bit classic Sonic the Hedgehog. Each player chooses Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or Amy to play as they make their way through 4 classic Sonic zones. You can challenge a single zone or adventure through all of them in campaign mode. As you traverse these iconic zones, you can save the woodland creatures the evil Dr. Eggman has captured, using character-unique abilities to roll dice and take out obstacles in your path. Place dice to run through zones, collect rings, power-ups, and Chaos Emeralds, and defeat the badniks that stand in your way. A zone isn't complete until the players face off against one of the bosses from across the Sonic franchise, where they must try to score high enough hits to defeat Dr. Eggman and his army before time runs out. So a couple disclaimers here. This was a review copy, so thank you to Kes for providing it. And in addition, my girlfriend does now work for Kes. So I do want to be transparent with that. I did get the review copy. I did play this with Tony before she did join the company, and my thoughts are my own on this. I'm always going to be straight up and honest with all of y'all to just say what my honest, true opinions are on these games. So anyways, that said, I really like this. I talked about this on my PAX drive home with Jamie. I did play this with Allie while we were at PAX with Tony, and you can just tell that there was so much care that was taken between making the connection between the gameplay in this game and then the theme of the video game. Just to give you a brief history of my involvement with the Sonic franchise, I've been playing since I was 10 years old. I played the OG Sonic back when it came out, and Sonic 2 got a ton of time. And then when it came to Sonic and Knuckles and Sonic 3, it was mind-blowing that I could go and plug one of the cartridges in and, have this new character that would access these different zones, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's actually relevant. But I've been playing Sonic for a long time, the classic Sonic, and this is what this kind of aims towards, is that classic Sonic feel. But a few things I really saw that stood out to me as far as making that connection. You're trying to get through these zones as quickly as possible, so you're rolling dice, you're placing them, you're manipulating them so that they match what you want. And then badniks are getting in your way. So, if you go and you kind of take too many rolls, they're going to go and deal you damage, and you're going to have to deal with that as well. The bonus stage where you're going to look for Chaos Emeralds and get some power-ups and goodies, rings and the shoes that you're able to go and manipulate the die roll is really cool. You'll also find your Chaos Emeralds in there, which have these powerful abilities if you use them, but they are worth more points at the end of the game if you don't, which is really cool as well. And then a big press your luck element to it. Like I said, you're speeding through these zones. it almost always felt like if you went too fast in the video game, there was always a chance that you would kind of mess up and, get hit and have to deal with it. But you didn't want to go completely slow either. So having that pressure luck and that gambling element to this game did feel really good too, because you're taking your time, and that's going to hurt your progress as well, because you only have a certain amount of time to get through these, not like actual physical time, but these time tokens that you will get if you do have dice left over. So you could have made progress, you didn't. You were kind of a little too slow, as Sonic would say. So yeah, this is a very solid game. A lot of great ways to mitigate your dice placement. The skills in how you choose to roll your dice and what dice to roll, those were very fun too. Amy's spin dash was kind of one that stood out to me, where you're rolling 2 dice, you're kind of revving up a little bit, and you roll 2 dice at a time. If those 2 dice don't match, you roll another 2 dice. If none of the faces on their match, you get to roll another 2 dice. So, you're kind of building that speed up and revving up, and I really like that. And then things like the Knuckles secret passage, he has his own ability where he has his own card that he gets to go the bonus stage, if he completes it. And in the games, he could access areas in the original games that Sonic couldn't. So I love seeing little thematic tie-ins like that, little tiny details I feel really help this game kind of shine. The artwork and graphic design was fantastic. It brought me right back to the games, especially that front cover. I mentioned that as soon as that artwork was released, I was like, this takes me back all the way to my childhood. And there is a secret for getting all the Chaos Emeralds. There is actually a physical secret. I did actually accidentally see part of that before I realized I wasn't supposed to. I'm going to blame Megaland for that. I do check underneath the insert frequently, so don't do that. Just leave the insert where it is. You don't need to know what's underneath the insert until you're told. But yeah, from what I've seen, I haven't been able to get to it yet, but from what I've seen, it was really cool. And, having just like the franchise where you get a secret for getting all the Chaos Emeralds is a really nice tie-in as well. So again, the kind of common theme here is just the tie-ins and, making this feel thematic. So as far as color vision goes, this was absolutely fine for me. There were 4 colors of dice. They were called out on your player board depending on what you were rolling, and then the zones themselves had different colors on them that you had to place a certain color to make progress. That was not an issue as well. All the colors were absolutely fine. There was red, yellow, blue, and black. So if you do have trouble distinguishing between any of those, you might want to take a look at the colors on pictures before you go and invest in this game, or try to find somebody else with a copy of it. But again, I think everything was distinct enough that I was able to tell just fine. Nothing was even relatively close. So for my final thoughts for this game, this is quite the solid love letter to the Sonic franchise. I was very impressed. I'm kind of jaded when it comes to franchises and, tie-in games. There have been a history of some decent tie-in games, whether it's The Thing, board game that I was a huge fan of. I've heard that Battlestar Galactica is a fantastic tied-in game with a license. I haven't been able to get that out to the table yet. But yeah, there's been some good examples and there's been some atrocious examples, and this definitely kind of feels like it goes more towards that great tie-in as well. And there was obviously a lot of care. Tony obviously cares about it. I actually got some insight talking to Lauren, at Cass, that Tony really does care, and he was jabbing her ear off about, all these different, things that he was trying to incorporate. And you could tell that this was a love letter for him. It's a really tough task to do justice to an iconic franchise for so many. I mean, again, I was playing this since I was 10, and to see it come out in this form and have it be something that I love playing as much as I like playing the old games, where I can have a tabletop version. I don't have to go and sit in front of a screen, and I can play it with my friends, is really cool. And big fan of this. This continues to be on my mind, and seeing table time after my first play of it at PAX Unplugged. This one is going to my keeper shelves and going to be here for quite a while, and I'm definitely going to be hitting those secrets very soon, so I'm excited for that. That was Sonic Roll. And stay tuned, because coming up next, we have an interview with Dominic Crapuchettes. On today's episode, we have Dominic Crapuchettes. While Dominic may be best known in our circles as the founder of North Star Games, he's also been known as a salmon boat captain, professional Magic the Gathering player, and a creator of a game that got banned from his school. Dominic, welcome to Cardboard Time.
Hi, thank you, Arwen.
So it's so good to have you here. We got connected through Ross, who is a wonderful associate at your company. I absolutely loved talking to Ross. He was a delight. And looking forward to talking to you. Your name is a name that I heard a lot about, kind of coming into the industry and starting my journey in the industry. And this is so cool to kind of come full circle and be able to interview you. So this is amazing for me. I hope it's going to be a great experience for you as well.
Thank you. So far, I've enjoyed our conversation. So this is I really appreciate it. Quick question, because when did you come into the industry?
So I really started getting into board gaming in like 2011. And, that was around the time that things were really ramping up. Dungeon Quest was my first hobby game, which is kind of off standard from Catan or Carcassonne for many people. It was a little bit different.
Or Dominion. Yeah, so
Dominion.
The reason I ask is because I'm basically a no-name person now. And so the fact that I was a name brand person, I'm like, it seems like you entered the hobby a while back when I was more well known.
Yeah, it was definitely in that area of, the evolutions of the world starting to come out, and Wits and Wagers was a big thing, and that kind of thing, which we will talk about on this podcast. So,
all right.
But the first thing that I need to ask you is about Kabloogie, because I've heard this story and I need the audience to hear about it as well.
Yes. All right. So any specific questions, or just
the story of it I find very fascinating.
I'm going to give you the whole story as I remember it. This was 8th grade. We used to play this game where we would draw tanks on a sheet of paper, and then we'd take the pencil and we'd hold the pencil on the sheet of paper on the tank, and then you'd slide the pencil, and however far that mark went, that's where the tank, you'd either say the tank is moving or the tank is shooting. And for some reason, I came from a board game family, and I was like, this should be made into a game, and there should be rules. And I have no idea why I thought this, because it was a game and there were rules. But I guess I didn't like the rules of flicking the pencil. So I created a game where you had there were tanks, planes, runway, walls, small missiles, big missiles, like just kind of like a potpourri of war things. And they all had costs, and you bought your side and then created it kind of like Stratego. And so you then set yourself up. And then the game was broken into 4 action points. So you got each turn was 4 turns, and you could either move or shoot, and any combination of the two. So you could shoot 4 times, you could move 4 times. And it just took off, and it was really fun. And what we'd do is we would cut the graph paper in half. Each person would make their side. Then we'd tape it together, and then one person would play during one class. And then, during the next period, we'd switch it off and the other person would take their turn. And it grew to, I was at a small private school. It grew to about 30 people playing all the time. And it really was a problem. And so at some point they banned it from school, which I think I took a lot of pride in. I was like, well, they just banned my game. Yeah. So, and then I had a friend, an acquaintance kind of, who we used to carpool with to go to school. He wanted to go into business with me. So he got a copyright form and filled it out and was giving it to me. And so I still have that copyright form that we got out for it. And I remember just kind of being confused. I was never a career-driven person, so I was just like, we're having fun. And I had no plans of starting a business. But yeah, that's what happened in 8th grade.
That's awesome. Like, I've never heard of anybody else having their game banned from a school, so I think that's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
So after you got done with school, you started salmon boat captaining, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, so in high school, I wanted to start a board game company. That was back then I just called it a game company because I was doing RPGs too. Mm-hmm. And so in high school, instead of doing schoolwork, I was often just working on games and working on RPGs. And my business, for my final economics paper, and this isn't economics at all, was a business plan. But somehow I convinced him to do that for this game company. So that's kind of what I wanted to do, but I always knew that was kind of irresponsible and wasn't going to happen. And everyone told me, don't do that. I've gone up every year to to fish on my dad's fishing boat. So at some point I took over captaining. And so that was really how I supported myself and put myself through school, was every summer for 6 to 8 weeks, super intense, captaining a salmon fishing boat, earning a lot of money, and then paying my way through school.
That's incredible. And there was also kind of a night that you had that made you determine that you were going to start North Star, and that was kind of the end of, going on the salmon boat?
So this is where I'm going to have to be honest and unmesh marketing with reality.
Okay.
So these are all true stories, but the truth is always more complicated than a marketing message. Mm-hmm. The episode that I talk about happened. It was my first year captaining. Near-death experiences happened multiple times. I would say 5 times where I was really scared for my life.
Oh, wow.
So that one experience, I was scared for my life, but probably not the most. That's probably the second scariest. So that's a true story. The only part that's not true is going up to the flying bridge and guiding myself home by the North Star. That was, in hindsight, we named it North Star, and I wanted to tie it to the company.
Gotcha.
It was cloudy. I didn't need the North Star to guide it anyways. I had no electronics, but I could look out and see the lights and kind of know which direction was land just from where the boats were and where we were at. Mm. So that's the only made-up part. Everything else is true, except I kind of make it seem like after that episode, I dropped anchor and went. But it was after a bunch of episodes. I always wanted to start this company. This was a long-standing thing. And then finally, at one point, it was the right time to stop and start this venture.
Well, it kind of, sounds like it in the fact that, you were doing this business planning throughout the entire time and you were constantly thinking about that. And I think that kind of leads into more of your philosophy of how you operate North Star and, the philosophy behind bringing employees in and basically, vesting them after a certain amount of time. And it's more about the the games and trying to build up quality as opposed to, just running a business kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah, you've done your homework. That's
I did a little bit. I try.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Yeah, that has not changed. That is still, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun to talk about that, but
no, please go ahead.
If you look at what we've released, the brands we've released, I think we've released fewer games than any other game company out there by a huge margin. We've released 1 to 3, one brand every 1 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And at our height, we had 30 employees. So it's not because we were just 2 people working in a basement. We were full-timers doing this full speed. And we just really, we'll get into it a little bit later on why I'm so meticulous and a little bit about that. But yeah,
absolutely.
It just takes time to make a game that shines on me.
So that's something that I do kind of do in my personal life, which I won't get into at this moment. But, it's quality. I've always focused on that. It's always been a big part of my life, and I do respect that, focusing on quality as opposed to quantity. So I do want to take you back to the beginnings of the company and assembling Cluzzle from home and what that was like.
It was horrible. So in terms of lessons learned, that was not the way to go about it. So this is what I actually did. While I was at business school, I sourced the components to Cluzzle from 12 different manufacturers.
Oh, wow.
And then had them all sent to my apartment. And then I don't know if you saw any of the pictures.
I did. They're amazing.
My business school roommate was a saint. And literally there was so many boxes, you had to just walk through this hallway to get into the kitchen, from the bedroom through the living room to the kitchen. There was just a maze of boxes. And then we made of the clay a throne, and it was called the Cluzzle throne. And we just turned it into a seat, and you could actually sit there and watch TV. I got lucky. When we graduated, we were in a recession. So in 2004, there was kind of a dot-com type recession.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my classmates couldn't find jobs.
Yep.
And basically what happened is one of our classmates allowed us to use their basement. So we stored a whole bunch of these boxes in their basement. And then we would have these pizza parties. And we'd have pizza and beer. And basically it was like a get-together for all these MBA people that couldn't find jobs. And we'd have, 6 or 7 friends all in the basement doing monotonous, super, super monotonous work. Grab one of these, put this one here, grab this in, put these into sorts of 10, put this into the... And it took us 3 months. 3 months of pretty much full-time work, and we got a lot of free labor, or labor for pizza, just to put together, I think it was 2,500 games.
Oh, wow.
And my cost per unit was $13.50, somewhere in there, $13.57, I forget exactly. And the next print run in China, the cost per unit was $2-3.
Jeez.
Completely assembled and then shipped to a warehouse.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
It's so amazing to kind of think about that. And I do remember those times because that's right around when I graduated from college, the 2005 timeframe. And it was such a bad recession that there were no jobs MBA, tech, engineering, whatever it was. There was nothing out there. So I actually wound up staying on for my MBA, so I had a little bit more credibility to actually get a job after my engineering degree. So I remember those times very well.
Yeah, and you maybe graduated right afterwards, which was the right thing. We graduated. So for me, it was fine. In fact, actually, it was great for me because I had all these playtesters. So not only assemblers, but we'd get together and we'd play. Wits and Wagers hadn't yet been released. And so lots of playtest evenings, we'd just have a party Friday night. And 30 MBAers would come over and we'd playtest the game.
So speaking of Wits and Wagers, you made the transition for me. This is great. I do want to talk about this because Wits and Wagers Vegas is still one of my favorite party games to this day. I absolutely love Wits and Wagers. If you haven't gone out and played it, definitely do so because it is fantastic. Or just track me down. I'll gladly play it at any time. Kind of take me through some of the early ideation behind Wits and Wagers. You know, what were you thinking at the time? How'd you come up with the concept?
So, like a lot of my successful games, they're in my head for years. Trivial Pursuit came out when I was in high school, and obviously wildly popular. I think they sold 20 million copies in 1 year, which is just ridiculous. So everyone was playing it, and I didn't like it. I was like, this feels like all the parts of school that I don't like. Regurgitating memorized facts. And it was like a pop quiz. It was just like, oh, here's your question in front of everyone, and you're like, pop quiz. One of the things I also didn't like is the questions were super uneven. Sometimes you're like, oh, that was easy. I could answer that. Oh, I could answer that. And then it gets to you, and you're like, I have no idea. And it's vice versa for all the different people.
Right.
So at the time, I was like, well, why don't we just all answer every question? So I was redesigning it in my head in high school. And one of the things I realized is I don't like to regurgitate memorized facts. It's just not something that I was interested in terms of my education. What I was interested in is making good judgments and understanding concepts. And so I started tackling the idea of, well, how do I test someone's skill at understanding a concept? And there's really no real easy way to do it, but that's why all the questions have numbered answers and you're making estimates. And so what you're doing is making a judgment call based upon different facts that you have memorized and data points. You're trying to make a good estimate. And in my mind, that was a skill that's more useful to people in just everyday life than regurgitating memorized facts. So like when you're at your job, you're making judgment calls all the time. Furthermore, with Wits and Wagers, you have the ability to bet on someone else's answer. And so you're also working in teams all the time, and you're forced to make a judgment call of, is so-and-so more of an expert in this area, or is this other person more of an expert, or am I the expert in this area? And those judgment calls are a really important skill to working in teams. And so I think part of Wits and Wagers' success is it's actually reinforcing skills that are actually critically important in the workplace today. And anyone who studies kind of play will see that people like to play, like dogs will play fight, cats will play fight. They're practicing skills that are important. And so I think part of its success is like these skills are important, which is why they're interesting and which is why they're fun. And so you're learning, a little bit of facts, a little bit about your friends, a little bit about how to estimate, a little bit about when to take risks, all in a very simple game. Real quick on the thought process, I really wanted a bridge to the familiar. I spoke with a lot of people on why do they play Trivial Pursuit but not these other games. And one of the reasons was, I feel like I'm bettering myself. I don't feel like I'm wasting my time. And so, because they were learning something. And so that was because really traditionally games were like things you played with kids, and adults were like, I don't want to waste my time. So I was like, well, I'd like to work with trivia because people feel like they're not wasting their time. You can also, trivia gives you touch points because everyone went to school for 12 years here in the US. And so you can there's this built-in touch points where you can kind of, oh yeah, I remember something, and that creates like social connections at the table. So I had that one side, which I'd worked on a little bit in high school. Gambling was just starting to be hot. Trivia poker was starting to take off.
I remember that.
Sorry. No Limit Texas Hold'em.
Yep.
I, looked at what they did in the music industry, and they would take a tried and true beat from Africa that had been worked on for generations and kind of had like a really good vibe. And then they would take, something from New Orleans, like riffs, like a chord progression, and then they would take maybe some sort of melodic something from another genre, and they would fuse these genres together. And each individually had been polished for generations by cultures. And then there was a bridge to the familiar because people were familiar with these things. And then there was a feeling of fresh newness because they're being merged in ways that hadn't been merged. So that's what I was trying to do when I was merging gambling, betting with trivia. And that basically sums it up. It used to be called No Limit Trivia Poker, KNOW, No Limit. And you used to write your own answers and then bet them down, and there were rounds of betting, just like it kind of mirrored Texas Hold'em. And it just wasn't the party game I was looking for, because anytime you won chips, someone lost chips. I tried it at several parties, and it just didn't work. And so I revamped the whole thing with the thought of, how do we play against the house so that we can all win together and all cheer together? And then that's when it kind of found its final form.
Yeah, I think that's really the secret sauce, is that duality of, hey, I have this knowledge that I can, kind of show off. I know about this, I know about that. But also, if you aren't really good at trivia, you don't have those facts necessarily, you can still very much participate in the fact that you can gamble on who you do think is going to know. And that's why I think it's been such a hit for us. I haven't played it in maybe a little bit, but it was extremely popular for a number of years in my house and work trips. I would take it on work trips. I'd play it with my coworkers. And probably very soon it's going to make its way back to the table, because it deserves the spotlight. It's fantastic.
Yay! Yeah, we got really, it was a lot of hard work, but we got lucky too. I think it resonates with three different types of people. So one, there are people that are really interested in knowledge, and so they're just making good estimates, and that's just interesting for them to put out a good estimate, to learn what the actual answer is. There are people that like to take risks and bet big and win big, and like the ups and downs people like. And then there's another type of person that wins Wits and Wagers more often than anyone. And they care about their social network, they care about their friends, and they know who to bet on and who to be influenced by. And interestingly enough, I did some stats for a while, and interestingly enough, that was the archetype that won more often. I
believe it.
Was knowing their friends and who to bet on and who to be influenced by, and then using that knowledge to bet big at the right times.
You can kind of see, who to follow, who's right. It's such a great dynamic. I absolutely love it. Yeah. So you had like a huge amount of success. I promise,
oh God, yeah.
Two more business questions and then we're done with that, because I know that you we had a talk before this, just transparency. We did have an email chain, and Dominic basically said, I really like designing, and business is a way for me to be able to design, and it's a means to an end. And I absolutely love that, because I am very, very similar. The business side of things has kind of waned on me quite a bit, and I really just like doing what I do and wish that I didn't have to have money to do that. But so you had a very big boom with Wits and Wagers, got into Target stores, got on the shelves, and you had some ups and downs with that, because, a new buyer comes in and says, I don't like the way that this previous buyer was doing things. I'm going to change my philosophy. Can you talk about kind of the operations in the board game industry and those swings that you might experience, and, just how crazy that can get?
Okay. I'm going to start, for those who kind of don't know North Star Games and kind of its origins. We sold, in the end, over 3 million copies of Wits and Wagers. Our follow-up game was called Say Anything. We sold over 1 million copies of Say Anything. We sold about 500,000 copies of the Evolution brand, so the whole series combined. Now that's in hobby. We sold 500,000 copies of a game called Happy Salmon, and we sold, I think, maybe 100,000 copies of The Quacks of Quinlanburg. We were the first people to bring that to the United States. Was there any other successes?
Paint the Roses, is more of that hobby sphere, but, that's kind of been hot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been hot, but there's in hobby there's like a hot where you're selling like 25,000 copies, and then there's a hot like Wingspan where you're selling
Right.
1 million copies, and
True.
they're very different types of hot. So anyways, over the course of the company, we've sold like 5.5 million, pushing 6 million copies of games, which is a lot. We grew to 30 people, and we expanded too fast in too many different directions. We were in toy and specialty, totally different market, totally different needs of the players, totally different drivers. The whole bit channel just works differently. We were in hobby, of course, that's where we started. We were in mass, and we were in digital. And so we ended up falling apart and basically declaring bankruptcy. I bought the assets for very, very little from the investors. And I'm restarting my company now with a laser focus, trying to have a laser focus, really tough, on hobby board games. So you wanted to talk a little bit about Target. So I'll explain, because we were there. It was a different world when we got into Target. We were the very first game to transition from hobby into Target. Target was not doing hobby games at the time. There was no hobby game section. And so we were one of the very few companies, but the only company for a while in hobby that had a direct relationship with Target. We still met with them directly. They paid us directly. Right now it all goes through one of 3 intermediaries, like PSI, I think maybe Flat River, they're new, but PSI and the Wilco Group were the 2 back in the day. But we had a direct relationship. So what happened is Hasbro had a lock on the Target game aisle. And so Target and Walmart would use board games as a loss leader because Hasbro had 90 to 95% of the aisle. And so they could just say, this is the price. Target wanted to break that monopoly that Hasbro had. So they literally invested in us even when we weren't really the best possible game for them, because they wanted to chip cracks into that monopoly. And as you can tell, it was successful. I mean, Barnes & Nobles and Target together broke that, and Hasbro now has, I'm going to say, 25% maybe? I don't know. I haven't gone back and looked because this was back when I wrote business plans. I was doing this type of analysis. So they actively said, well, these aren't really the numbers we want, but we like the growth rate. We like what you're doing. This game is fantastic. So back then, they didn't get pitches from game designers. They got pitches from a marketing team that didn't even know how to play the game. So when we pitched Wits and Wagers to Target, it was a prototype, and the buyer, I still remember this, it was so impactful. He puts his hands down, he like covers his eyes, he rubs his face, and he's like, all right, I've got to be honest with you guys here. I love this game. This is amazing. Like, I love what you're doing. This is so creative. Like, this is a really, really good game. But here's the problem. If I take this game, it won't sell. We've done this before. It won't sell. In my experience, there's only 3 ways to get a game to sell off my shelves. 1 is a Hollywood license. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Friends, Simpsons. 2 is a $2 million nationwide television budget. And this is $2 million, this is 20 years ago, so I don't know what it is now. And the 3rd is you have to build up a grassroots following, and you need to be selling at the minimum 50,000 a year before anything can happen here, but even that's way too early. You need to be selling 100,000 copies every year for there to be a big enough brand that we can get the numbers that we need. So that was kind of our mission. So this was in 2004, before we had ever released Wits and Wagers. Or maybe it was 2005 before the release. So that's what we decided to try to do. And so we were just going out to all these shows and conventions. We were going to bars and doing trivia nights, and we were just building grassroots brand. And slowly built it up. And when that buyer left, the next buyer looked at the numbers and went, I think we're going to cut you.
Wow.
And we're like, well, we're growing at 100% a year right now. Like, you can't cut us. And he's like, I just don't think the numbers are good. So Fire Drill, we had a few weeks to do a national radio campaign. and we found a big national radio personality to promote Wits and Wagers for 3 weeks over the holidays, and it was a huge success, and that put us just barely in the numbers. And he was like, "Well, I think we'll try it. We'll try you for one more year, but you guys, it needs to blah 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 blah." And then we just we skyrocketed from there.
Yeah, I love that because it's very much like that could have gone the other way too, but you did enough work that you were able to make it happen. And I mean, it's something that we see to this day where, Target shelves consistently have a lot of hobby board games. And like you said, that really wasn't the case back when I was starting in the hobby.
Zero. We were the only one there. Then Settlers went over, I think. Mm-hmm. And they kept talking to us. They're like, there were a few Settlers, maybe Carcassonne, I forget, but just a couple hobby games. And they kept asking us for hobby games. They're like, "You're hobby game players. Why are you not giving us a hobby game?" And I kept telling them, we don't have a big brand in hobby right now. Like, we need to build a brand there. Like, Settlers has sold millions of copies. And so this was a new buyer, and he didn't realize that the numbers wouldn't have been good enough. Mm-hmm. So that's why we launched Evolution first, is to try to build a brand in hobby before we finally gave them the game that they had been asking for 5 years or whatever. And then we gave them Evolution in the beginning. And that sold pretty well. We sold 100,000 copies of that through Target. Mm-hmm. But actually, and this is going to lead into my current project, my biggest regret is Evolution in the beginning is a different system than Evolution. So it didn't really lead people in. And so then there's a whole group of fans that want expansions for Evolution in the beginning. And I'm saying, oh, play this other game, Evolution. They're similar, but they're different. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't really transition well into what I wanted the brand to be. So this new project that I'm working on right now is like a re-envision. It's like going into the past and saying, what would have been the right way to do this? And the right way would be for there to be a core kernel that's very simple and easy to bring people into the system. And then what we're doing now is we've created a modular game system where every game you mix and match these modules to create a unique ecosystem to play that game.
Yeah, I did get to take a chance at looking at that at PAX Unplugged, and let me tell you, I am so excited about the system. And just the way that Ross explained it was incredible. So I'm super looking forward to this.
This is 13 years of experience in ecosystem-based games, and me just doing everything the way that I wish I had done it from the start. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and you have every right to be. I'm just excited to, once it finally hits the table, I am excited to explore it and see all the different combinations in that, because to me, that's one of the things that I love in a game is that variable setup. How do I adapt to this? How do I look at these different conditions? Can I build this game up the way that I want to play? The ability to kind of curate a game to, your table that night with it is also fantastic.
Yeah, you got the pitch. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
absolutely love it. So I lied, so no more business questions. Okay. But I do want to talk about, you were one of the first people, if not the first founder of Protospiel back in 2001, which I didn't know until you let me know that. Can you kind of give us a little brief history of that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily call myself the founder. There were 3 people. I was definitely the person that organized it. So it was in my city, and I found space at the library, and I organized the whole thing. It was Stephen Glenn's idea.
Okay.
And he was following what was going on in Germany, and they had game designer conventions in Germany. And so he's like, why don't we have it in the US? So this was his brainchild. This was his passion, what he wanted to do. I was just the person that was starting a board game company, and I was like, all right, let's stop talking about it. Let's actually do it. And so I was the person that actually did it. So yeah, 2001, very first very first convention of game designers in the United States. There was only 7 people there, but it was open to the public, and we got 7 people. Then the next year, there was 20, and then the next year there was 40, and then it just grew. And then I think Unpub came in maybe almost a decade later. I forget when their first year was, and they came in with just a much bigger view. We were just people that couldn't find people to play test our games.
Yep.
We're like, I want play testers.
Yeah, and I mean that has expanded, just throughout the United States. You hear about Protospiel Cleveland, which is the one that I'm familiar with, and Chicago, and I think there's one in New Mexico. Just everywhere that you go, there's a Protospiel that's there. And I think we have touched on it so much that they are incredibly important events to get to. You get to play the new stuff first. I have played multiple things at Protospiels that are now on store shelves. So, if you want the bragging rights of being able to go in and say, I played that before it was on store shelves, and this early version of it was, such and such, and it had this, and, you make a recommendation, it may wind up in that game, because that's how changes get made. That's how feedback gets taken and implemented. You have to have those playtesters be able to do that. So I think that they're incredibly important events. Incredibly important.
You can't... Playtesting is like just the critical element to getting a game polished.
Yeah, 100%. And we already talked a little bit about what's in the future for North Star. You have your current project that you're very focused on. Anything else that you kind of want to talk about?
So, let me... Not really. Mm-hmm. I'm more interested in talking about nature, because that's the project we're on. But I will go on to a different one, maybe a little bit of like the future. So we've touched on it, and I think Ross has explained it to you, but it hasn't really been explained to your audience. So part of the module game system is what I said earlier. You grab whatever mix of modules you want, and then you tailor that experience for that game. But part of what makes it unique is each module so far, and I'm going to keep trying to do this, has a unique identity. A thematic identity, a mechanical identity, an emotional identity that matches with the theme, and even a gamer archetype. So I'll just go through the 5 modules that we have right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jurassic module. It is exactly what you expect it to be. Instead of these small creatures that you can have these huge dinosaurs stomping across the land. And it's really caters to, I'm going to call us boys in a basement, and I'm going to put me in that category. People that want direct conflict. So it's kind of dudes on a map type of experience. Big monsters battling it out. Emotionally, when humans think of Jurassic, they think of these, I guess it's not really Tyrannosaurus Rex. I guess it's Allosaurus, but they think of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, big monsters fighting, and then they also think of, I'm a human. I'm no longer the apex predator. Like, we are the apex predator. We own this world. All of a sudden, you're like, I'm afraid of these big things. And so we found a way to have both work in the world. One, little small creatures can scurry and like hide in the cracks that get overlooked by the big monsters that are battling it out. So that's one module designed for people that like direct conflict. Flight is for people that don't like direct conflict. So it's much more of a Euro style game. The flight allows your species to escape from predators, and then they can migrate far away. So flight is a world of abundance that is there for the taking for any species that has wings. And so it's about freedom to escape, to find abundance, and to when the world is not working the way you want, just fly away and migrate to a faraway place. The natural disasters module is about people that like the chaos and the storytelling elements that are brought with chaos. So it's for people that don't like the Euro games, where you're in control and optimizing. It generates stories. It's about the fact that nature is bigger than you. You are not in control of natural disasters. And so you have this world that you are in control of, and when we're playing Euro games, you're like in a world that you have a lot of control over, and that's what people like. But in the real world, you do have a lot of control, but you also have a lot that you're not in control of. Mm-hmm. And some people prefer that experience. It provides better stories and better, hey, do you remember that time when this natural disaster came out and this was going on, and then another natural disaster, and these, so the way these natural disasters work, they sometimes amplify each other and they sometimes don't, and they generate great stories. Another benefit of like that module is when you're playing against a really experienced strategic player like myself, a lot of people want to just add that module because they know it gives them a chance to win, because there's chaos. And I still enjoy it because I've got a lot of these. It adds another layer of strategy too. I've got to deal with the random chaos and figure out how to modify my strategy. The rainforest, it evokes the Amazon. And in the Amazon, there are lots of species everywhere, and you don't know, and there's lots of diversity, and you don't know like what's out there. And so we have a mechanic where you don't flip over the traits. And so there's all this hidden information and tons of species. And a little bit of like the surprise element and a little bit of the bluffing element of like keeping your trait hidden and pretending like it's a defensive trait, like pretending like it's poison from a poison dart frog and it really being nothing. And then the final one is tundra. And in the Arctic tundra, you're living on the fringes of the livable world. And so it really resonates with people that like hard games. Like life is hard and I'm struggling to stay alive, and I'm struggling to get population, I'm struggling to get food, kind of like the Agricola experience. Mm-hmm. And so all of these emotional experiences resonate with different types of people depending on what they're going through in their lives, depending on the what they're wrestling with in their own life. And so you as the game host, you get to mix and match these things together to create an experience tailored to your group.
Yeah, and that's why I love so much about it is the fact of I can't think of another game that you can actively do that.
So when I think about game design, I think about like what are the elements that humans love. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is building, like Legos, and being creative. And this is touching a little bit on that element. You get to creatively mix and match because you can put in 2 modules or 3 modules, and you can mix and match and kind of create an experience and then play it and explore that experience and see what it provides.
Or dump the whole thing into the soup and say, here you go.
Or yeah,
just
and
enjoy.
I know people will do that.
So, Dominic, one thing that we do touch on, quite a bit on the show is inclusion in the industry, and you've been able to see the evolution of the industry over time. You've been a major player in it for a long time at this point, longer than I have. A, what have you seen as kind of progress in the industry, and then B, what do you think that we can do to kind of help progress inclusion as well?
Yeah, those are really, really good questions. An art form doesn't really reach its pinnacle if it's not expressing all that life has to offer. And so when you are not inclusive, you're not expressing the full amount of what's out there. So for me, I'm not trans, and I'm not a woman, and I'm not black. So I'll just put it out there. I'm a white male. Mm-hmm. So my specific issues are going to be different from, each person's issues. I like inclusion because I like hearing all the experiences that people have and bringing them to the table and learning about people through games. But for me, my personal issue has always been a lack of women. So this is just in high school, women wouldn't play. And so when I would play an RPG, it would be with very awkward people, and they would want to go to the bar and pick up on women and laugh. And I would kind of feel like, okay, that's just not what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And it just always bothered me. I'm like, why can't just, the friends that I hang out with normally, because I had my friends that I played sports with, the friends that I smoked in the smoke shack with, friends that I played games with, but they weren't together. And when it came to RPGs, I was with very awkward people. I couldn't, not until I was an upperclassman at my boarding school could I rope in my friends. Because when I was not an upperclassman, I didn't have enough social clout to get people to do this geeky thing with me. So that's one of the things that I've seen very dramatically is women coming into the market more, largely thanks to the Spiel des Jahres, which was for families. And they got rid of direct conflict in their games. There was a lot of resource management, and so we get that Euro-style optimization puzzle. But it's a lot more inclusive than fighting. Fighting is really just something that boys like to do, and not all boys, generally. And I know I'm painting with really, really broad strokes here. But that's what kind of the industry started at, is like, this is a battle. Who's smarter? Who's better? We're going to fight it out, and we're going to win. And that's chess, and that's Go, and that's even party games before Apples to Apples. So charades, it's a skill-based game. You've got really skillful people kicking your butt at charades. And in our family, it was always the women that won that one. But it's definitely a battle. And so figuring out how to include more people in that play and more types of play has been about including more types of people into the industry. And then what it allows me to do as a creator is explore some of these areas, because, the last thing I want to do is spend 3 years of my life designing a game and there aren't players for it. Like, that just feels like a waste of my time. But now I can create a cozy game. I can create a storytelling game. I can create a competitive strategy game. I can create party games. There's room to provide all different types of experiences. So to me, this is like a little bit esoteric, but that's at the high level what inclusion brings to the table, is allowing me as an artist to express all that humanity has to offer. More specifically, I know, as a trans person, you don't want to feel alienated, and you want to feel like your viewpoint is being expressed. And I know women feel that very strongly. I play test with Elizabeth once a week, Elizabeth Hargrave. And she's like, I don't want a battle game. I don't want a fantasy game. I don't want a sword dungeon crawler. I'm interested in nature, which,
Yep.
She and her partner are. And they go out hiking and they travel a lot. And so she's bringing those themes. And as we see, it's resonating with a ton of people that were never in the hobby before. So these themes are helping to bring in more people into the hobby.
Yeah, so I love the theme talk, because it's one thing that I have touched on before, where I have kind of tended more towards, Eurocentric themes and, building, trading goods in the Mediterranean and things like that, which are overplayed as well, in addition to fantasy themes and everything. But Elizabeth, I had her on the show, and, hearing her and her philosophy on things really kind of helped my perspective as well, in the fact that, if you bring more people into the hobby, you're also opening people up to different experiences both ways. So, where traditionally I didn't like conflict games, there might be a conflict game with a theme that I enjoy. And vice versa. I mean, I've seen friends of mine who wanted to play those direct conflict, fantasy games, or, space conflict or whatever, come in and they start playing Wingspan and they're like, oh, this is fantastic. I love this. I never knew. So I think that these games that are being produced right now are kind of opening up the conversation and kind of letting people experience different things that we wouldn't have had if somebody just said, well, this isn't, this type of game, and we're not going to publish it because it isn't going to sell. So I think having those games that have had chances taken on them have been fantastic. That's why I'm so excited about nature. I mean, just the ability for people to connect through that, I think, is a universal experience, and having those different play styles as well kind of brings everybody to the table too. And, kind of circling back, you do include more people that way.
Yeah. And one of the big problems with Evolution is it's aggressive. And when I was a pro Magic player, which is kind of what I thought of as hobby, that was kind of my hobby world, was everyone was at a high level of play and they were very strategic and you're battling it out. And what we found with Evolution is those people love the game, and there's it's like half the people hate Evolution in the gaming world, and half the people, I don't even think half, but the people who love it absolutely love it because it has a really interesting balance. But you get good at, the rule set's pretty clean and it's pretty thematic, and you get good at understanding when to take risks and what is a risk. But you play with an experienced player and a new player, and the new player just ends up being free food for experienced players because they don't even know how to defend themselves.
Yep.
And so the experience that they have sucks, just horribly sucks. And with Evolution being touted as the best Evolution game on the market in the journal Nature, it's been getting used in lots of universities, lots of high schools, lots of middle schools. And I always felt bad because I knew I'm providing to non-gamers. I mean, there's 20% might be gamers, but 80% are not gamers, and this is kind of their introduction to modern games. And I know I'm giving them a bad experience, and so I felt like a horrible ambassador. So Nature tries to change that without removing interaction. So there are some Euro games where there really is no interaction, and so there's no hard feelings, but there's also no interaction. An ecosystem has a tremendous amount of interaction. It's all stuck together. So I tried to figure out ways to keep that interaction, allow predators to be in the ecosystem, but to remove the sting from getting attacked.
Love that. Absolutely love it. So what is currently on your table right now?
So right now, the Kickstarter for Nature is going to be in September. So we're largely trying to find publishing partners to bring it internationally. We have people fighting for the rights in China, fighting for the rights in Korea. No one fighting for these other rights yet, but a lot of people interested. We've got all the basically every big company in Germany and France are interested in it, and so they're testing it. And in fact, and you said it was kind of fun to try stuff at Protospiel. I can send you a pre-production copy.
Ooh.
If you're interested.
I would love that.
Would you? All right, we'll talk about that afterwards. Yeah, we're just getting them printed now. So my job right now is trying to build community around the gameplay and publishing partners. On the design side, I'm working on the next 2 modules and the solo version. So the solo version for Nature, and the next 2 modules are going to be climate and disease.
Awesome.
Yeah, and everything starts with a core. So until I have the core, I don't work on it. But I've got a list of 30 different options that I've been polling people to figure out what ideas are the coolest. Wow. And then I start working on structures. So disease, the interesting thing is the way the disease spreads through an ecosystem. So you can get bacteria from eating plants. And then when predators eat a species that has a disease, they can get the disease. And then any scavengers in the game can get the disease. So it's kind of just adds this element of diseases and immunity into the game. And the way that it spreads, is modeling the way it really spreads in real life. And that's kind of the hook there.
That is so incredible. I love the concept of that. So Dominic, how can people get a hold of you on social media?
Well, I need to start doing social media better. Right now, I'm only on Twitter, and that's the name of the platform for people who are wondering.
Thank you.
And we are doing a new monthly blog series, which will come out on our website, and we will try to do better at letting people know. At the beginning of every month, I want to start letting people know on Reddit and just trying to let people know. Ross and I want to get our message out about our new company and what our new focus is. It's very different from the old North Star games, and we want to start getting people excited about the games that are in the pipeline.
Well, I'm definitely excited about Nature and Inheritors, which I did review a few episodes ago. Also a fantastic game. So
It's a great game.
It really is.
Yeah.
It was amazing. You know, Ross did describe it to me at PAX, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take a look at it. It sounds interesting. And then I got it to the table a few times, and I'm like, this is a great game. This really is a great game.
It is. Yeah, I should tout the horn of Jeffrey. He is an amazing designer. He's from Hong Kong. And so we're luckily, we've got a great relationship. And so we're getting a lot of we get whatever games we want that he does. But he has such a wide range. So we're trying to just get the ones that make sense for our product line. He is fantastic, and he's young, and he's going to be a powerhouse in this industry, I think, over the next decade.
I believe it. I absolutely believe it. I'm looking forward to more of his work as well.
Yeah, me too.
So, Dominic, thank you so much for being on today, and hope to talk to you in the future.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. Appreciate it.
And I think that will do it for us today. If you do want more information on Cardboard Time, you can always go to our website. I do need to update it. I've been horrible at doing that. My Instagram is at cardboard_time. I've made a conscious decision to try to avoid Twitter as much as possible. These days, it's getting bad, folks. And we've been talking about that for quite a while. We talked about that with Tiffany on the last episode, and it's gotten worse. There's been some incidents I'm not going to talk about. But yeah, I'm trying to stay away from Twitter. But you can catch me over on Blue Sky, where I'm probably most active at Cardboard Time, _. The Discord on the Tabletop Express server is always open. You can email me for an invite or ping me on any social network that I'm on. And then any questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics, you can hit that email up at cardboardtime@gmail.com. So anyways, I will have a few different reviews next time. I do plan on doing a little bit more from the review standpoint, and I do think that it's time to finally release the last recording that I did from PAX Unplugged all the way back in December with a very special guest. So as always, thanks again for listening. We'll see you around the table in 2 weeks for another episode of Cardboard Time.